Your wife's kid has no right calling us. Grandma and Grandpa, my mom said to my 14-year-old stepdaughter on Christmas. Right in front of everyone. My 8-year-old son stood up, walked over, and said something that made the room go silent. Hey, Reddit. My mom told my stepdaughter she wasn't family on Christmas night after 10 years of raising her. My 8-year-old son's response made everyone freeze. Then I cut them off completely and watched everything collapse. Here's what went down. Blake here, 38 male, industrial electrical engineer, working in suburban Columbus, Ohio. The story I'm about to tell happened last Christmas, but it's been building for a decade. I've been holding this in for months, trying to process everything that went down. But after seeing how it all played out, I need to get this off my chest. I work for a company that handles electrical system maintenance for manufacturing plants along the industrial district south of Columbus. It's not glamorous work, crawling through machinery at weird angles, diagnosing failing systems in 100-degree heat, replacing components that weigh more than most people can lift, but it pays around $62,000 a year, enough to support my family and keep the lights on. I wake up at 5 a.m. and usually don't get home until after dark. That's been my life for 15 years. The job's tough but honest. I spend my days in warehouses and manufacturing facilities, keeping the electrical systems running so production doesn't stop. When a conveyor belt stops moving or a machine loses power, I'm the guy they call. It's physically demanding work that leaves my hands permanently stained with grease and my back perpetually sore. But I'm good at it, and it provides for my family. That's what matters. About 11 years ago, I got electrocuted while fixing an industrial panel at a manufacturing plant. Some contractor had wired it completely wrong, crossed the neutral and hot wires, didn't ground anything properly, basically created a death trap waiting to happen. When I opened that electrical box to diagnose why the line kept tripping, the surge hit me before I could react. The jolt threw me backward about 6 feet. My hand felt like someone had stuck it in a fire. The burn wasn't severe enough to be life-threatening, but it was bad enough that my supervisor called an ambulance and made me go to the emergency room. I protested the whole way there, saying I was fine and could just wrap it up myself. The EMTs weren't having it. That's where I met Jen. She was working the night shift at the hospital, and she's the one who cleaned and bandaged my wound. I'll never forget how she tried not to laugh when I kept acting like everything was fine even though my hand was visibly shaking from the pain, and I could barely hold the clipboard to sign intake forms. She had this way of being professional while also seeing right through my tough guy act. We talked for 2 hours while waiting for the doctor to sign my discharge papers. Found out she'd been a nurse for about 6 years at that point, had moved to Columbus from a smaller town south of here, and was working nights because the pay differential helped with bills. She had this laugh that made the fluorescent-lit emergency room feel less depressing, made jokes about my insistence that I was totally fine, while clearly in pain. When I finally got discharged around 2 a.m., I asked if I could take her to breakfast sometime when she wasn't working. She smiled and wrote her number on one of those little notepads nurses carry around. Said she'd be free that Thursday if I was still interested, and not just high on painkillers. But what made me come back to the hospital the following week wasn't just Jen. During that first conversation in the emergency room, she told me she had a little girl named Sophie who was 4 at the time. Sophie's biological dad had left when she wasn't even a year old. No explanation, no calls, no child support. Nothing. Just disappeared one day like he'd never existed. Took his clothes in his car and never looked back. Jen was working and raising her daughter alone, renting a small apartment about 15 minutes from the hospital, working night shifts when she could get them because they paid more, then sleeping while Sophie was at daycare, then picking her up and spending evenings together before starting the whole cycle again. It sounded exhausting just hearing about it. That Thursday breakfast turned into dinner dates, which turned into weekend meetups. We took things slow because Jen was protective of Sophie and didn't want to introduce her daughter to someone who might not stick around. I respected that. We dated for about 3 months before she even mentioned the possibility of me meeting Sophie. The first time I met Sophie was on my 3rd official date with Jen. She'd arranged for us to have lunch at this diner near her apartment. The little girl was sitting in a booth, her tiny hands holding a plastic fork way too big for her grip, looking at me with these curious but cautious eyes. She had the same dark hair as her mom, pulled back in a ponytail with a bright pink scrunchie. I didn't know what to do or say. I'd never really been around kids much. Didn't have younger siblings, most of my friends didn't have kids yet. So I just sat down across from her and asked what she liked to eat. Sophie looked at me for a long moment, sizing me up the way only small children can. Then she said very seriously, "Pancakes with smiley faces. But the syrup has to be warm, not cold syrup." Simple as that. But I knew right then I'd fallen for both of them. From then on, everything just flowed naturally. Jen and I kept dating, and Sophie gradually warmed up to me. Started calling me Uncle Blake after about 2 months. Then just Uncle after another few months. I'd come over on weekends and we'd go to the park. I taught her how to ride her bike without training wheels in the parking lot of her apartment complex. Read her bedtime stories whenever Jen had to work night shifts and couldn't be there to tuck her in. I treated Sophie like she was my own daughter, even though no paperwork or biology said otherwise. Showed up to her kindergarten graduation. Helped Jen pack lunches for her first day of first grade. Learned to braid hair by watching YouTube videos because Sophie wanted her hair fancy for picture day, and Jen had to work. Fixed her broken toys instead of just buying new ones. The normal stuff parents do. A year later, I proposed to Jen. We had a small wedding at a local church with just family and a few close friends. Sophie was our flower girl, wearing a pink dress she picked out herself. It was one of the happiest days of my life. 2 years after the wedding, Carter was born. The little guy was the joy of the whole family. But what was most special was how Sophie loved her little brother. She was only 7 but already knew how to help with diaper changes and could sing him to sleep with songs she made up herself. Watching those two together, I believed our little family was perfect. But there was one dark corner I kept deliberately avoiding: my parents. Richard and Linda Mitchell live in suburban Westerville. They've been retired for 5 years. Dad used to be a warehouse manager for a food distribution company. Mom was an accountant for a dental office. Their life was stable, neither rich nor lacking. Standard middle-class retirement. And for 10 years, they never accepted Sophie. They treated her like an outsider. Not hateful or abusive, just indifferent. Like she was a house guest who'd overstayed her welcome, but was too polite to say anything about it. Sophie was like a shadow at family gatherings. A name mentioned with polite disinterest. A child who always received cheaper gifts while Carter got expensive ones. The pattern started early and never changed. Sophie's first Christmas with us, when she was 5 and I'd just proposed to Jen, my parents got her a coloring book from the dollar store. Meanwhile, my nephew got a remote control car. When Sophie turned 6, they forgot her birthday entirely. Didn't call, didn't send a card, nothing. When I mentioned it to my mom, she said, "Oh, I thought Jen was handling that since she's the mother." Sophie's elementary school graduation? My parents didn't come. Said they had a golf outing they couldn't cancel, but they'd rearranged their entire schedule the month before to attend my brother Kyle's girlfriend's baby shower. When Sophie started middle school and made honor roll her first semester, I sent the school photo to my parents, showing her holding the certificate. My mom texted back, "That's nice," and immediately changed the subject to ask when Carter's next football game was. Every family dinner, every holiday gathering, every casual visit, the pattern was always the same. Mom would fuss over Carter, asking about his day, his friends, his homework, his hobbies. Dad would ruffle Carter's hair and tell him stories about when he was young. Meanwhile, Sophie would sit there trying to contribute to conversations, only to be met with polite nods before the topic shifted back to Carter. The gift disparity got worse as the kids got older. For Sophie's 10th birthday, my parents gave her a used book they'd clearly picked up at a yard sale. Still had someone else's name written inside the cover. For Carter's 7th birthday that same year, he got a new bicycle. When Sophie needed supplies for a school project, my parents said they couldn't help because money was tight, but they had no problem buying Carter a brand new football helmet and cleats the following week. I saw it all. I knew it all. But I kept telling myself that time would change everything, that my parents just needed more time to open their hearts. I was wrong. Time didn't change anything. It just let everything build up until it exploded. Last Christmas night, everything I'd tried to hold together for 10 years completely collapsed in just a few minutes. I'd been through nearly 10 Christmases with Sophie, bringing her to my parents' house dozens of times, watching her stay quiet and try to fit in. But I'd never felt as ashamed as I did last Christmas, when my parents acted like she was just some stranger who'd wandered into their party by mistake. My parents' house was decorated just as it was every year. The old plastic Christmas tree they bought from a store that closed 15 years ago. Cheap cinnamon candles and 2 piles of gifts under the tree. The size difference was so obvious that anyone could tell which was which. The left pile was 3 times taller than the right one. I didn't need to guess which pile was for whom. The atmosphere in that cramped living room was as fake as the decorations. Mom enthusiastically greeted Carter with a warm hug right at the door, while she just nodded slightly at Sophie like she was a delivery person. Dad sat in his old recliner, eyes glued to the football game on TV, only looking up when Carter ran over to say hi. Meanwhile, Sophie stood in the corner of the room, clutching the paper bag with the gift she'd prepared herself, trying to smile like everything was normal. Jen squeezed my hand, her eyes asking if we should stay. I squeezed back, trying to send the message that everything would be okay. But deep down, I already felt something was wrong. Dinner passed in a tense atmosphere disguised by small talk about weather and gas prices. The meal itself was standard Christmas fare: ham that was slightly dry, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, rolls from the store bakery. Everyone sat around the old dining table that barely fit all of us, elbows bumping as people reached for dishes. Mom asked Carter about school, his grades, his teachers, the youth football team he'd just joined. Wanted to know if he was the quarterback yet, if he was making friends, if he needed any new equipment. Carter answered enthusiastically between bites of ham, telling stories about practice and games. My parents hung on every word like he was describing adventures from another planet. Meanwhile, Sophie sat quietly between Jen and me, occasionally getting a polite question thrown her way like, "You're doing well in school, right?" delivered in a tone that made it clear the asker didn't actually care about the answer. Sophie would say yes, she was doing fine, made honor roll again, had joined the debate team. The response was always the same: a quick, "That's good," before the conversation pivoted back to Carter. I watched my brother Kyle spend most of dinner checking his phone and making vague comments about his next big venture that would revolutionize the market. Guy was 33, still living off my parents, and had never held a job longer than 8 months. But they treated his delusional startup dreams like he was the next tech genius. The meal dragged on for over an hour. I kept catching Sophie's eye, trying to send silent messages that we'd leave soon, that this would be over soon. Jen's hand found mine under the table and squeezed tight. We'd had this same Christmas experience for years now, always hoping it would somehow be different, always disappointed when it played out exactly the same way. But the moment I feared most finally came: gift opening time. Carter was called up first. The little guy eagerly tore off the red wrapping paper, and when he saw the box inside, his eyes lit up. A brand new gaming console with 2 controllers and 3 games. A gift worth at least $400. Dad stood up, patting his grandson's shoulder with evident pride. "I knew you liked gaming," he said, voice warm. "You've been such a good boy this year. You deserve a reward." Then it was Sophie's turn. She walked over to the smaller pile and picked up the only box with her name on it. I looked at the size and already knew what was inside. She carefully unwrapped it, trying to maintain her smile. Inside was a clearance rack sweater from some discount store. Still had the orange sticker showing it was marked down to $12. $12. For a kid who'd spent 2 months teaching herself to knit so she could make my mom a scarf. Mom didn't even look at Sophie when she thanked her. Just gave a tight smile and said, "That's nice, dear." I felt Jen's hand tighten around mine, her nails digging in slightly. I could see the anger building in her eyes. But we'd had this conversation before. Don't make a scene at family gatherings. It'll just make things worse. They'll come around eventually. Except they never did. Sophie sat back down, still holding that cheap sweater, trying so hard to look grateful. Carter, bless his 8-year-old heart, came over and offered to share one of his new games with her. That's when I saw my mom's expression change slightly. Not pleased that her grandchildren were bonding, but annoyed that Carter was giving attention to Sophie. After gifts, Sophie pulled out the package she'd brought, the one she'd been clutching since we arrived. It was wrapped in newspaper and tied with a red ribbon she'd picked from her art supplies. "Grandma, I made this for you," Sophie said quietly, walking over to my mom. Mom took the package with the same expression someone might use when accepting a flyer on the street they plan to throw away immediately. She opened it slowly, revealing a blue knitted scarf. The stitches were uneven. You could tell it was handmade by someone still learning, but it was beautiful in its imperfection. Sophie had spent 2 months working on it, watching YouTube videos, redoing sections that didn't look right. I'd watched her work on it every night after homework, her small fingers struggling with the needles, determined to make something special for the grandmother who'd never shown her an ounce of genuine affection. Mom looked at the scarf for maybe 5 seconds. Then she put it down on the coffee table like it was contaminated. "That's sweet," she said, voice flat. Then she turned to my brother Kyle, who'd just walked in late from wherever he'd been. "Kyle, darling, come sit. Tell us about your new business venture." Sophie's face fell. She'd been dismissed, rejected, and everyone in that room saw it happen. That's when my mom dropped the bomb that changed everything. She was talking to Kyle about his latest failed startup idea when Sophie quietly asked if Grandma was going to try on the scarf. Just wanted to see if it fit right. Wanted to see if her work meant something to someone. Mom turned to look at Sophie, and I saw something in her expression I'd never seen before. Not just indifference. Actual hostility. "Your wife's kid doesn't have the right to call us Grandma and Grandpa," Mom said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. She looked straight at me. "I only have one grandson. The room went completely silent. The football game kept playing on TV. The cheap candles kept flickering. But every person in that room had stopped breathing. Sophie's face went pale. Jen's hand went to her mouth. My dad didn't even look up from his recliner, which told me everything I needed to know about whether he agreed with his wife. I was about to stand up when something unexpected happened. Carter, my 8-year-old son, put down his new gaming controller. He walked across the room to where Sophie was standing frozen. Then he looked directly at his grandmother and said something that made every adult in that room go quiet. If Sophie's not your granddaughter, then I'm not your grandson. The kid was 8, but he understood something my parents had refused to learn in 10 years. He took Sophie's hand and said, "Come on, we're going home." Carter walked toward the door, still holding his sister's hand. Sophie was crying now, silent tears running down her face. Jen was already grabbing our coats, and I was standing there looking at my parents, trying to find any words that would make sense of what had just happened. But there were no words, just the sound of Carter's little feet walking away from people who didn't deserve to be called his grandparents. "Blake, don't be dramatic," Mom said, her voice sharp. "I'm just saying the truth. She's not blood family. Neither is Jen," I said quietly. "Should I divorce her because she's not blood?" "That's different," Dad finally spoke up. "Jen's your wife. The girl is just what?" I cut him off. "Just a kid I've been raising since she was 4? Just a kid who calls me dad even though she doesn't have to? Just a kid who made a gift for someone who won't even look at her?" My mom stood up. "We have been nothing but kind to that girl." "Kind?" Jen's voice was shaking. "You gave her a $12 clearance sweater while Carter got $400 worth of gifts. You've been tolerating her existence, not being kind." "How dare you?" Mom started. "We're leaving," I said, "and we're not coming back." "Blake, you're overreacting." "No, Mom. I'm 10 years too late with this reaction." We left. Carter still held Sophie's hand the entire drive home. Nobody talked. The silence in the car was heavy, but not uncomfortable. More like everyone was processing what had just happened and didn't have words for it yet. The Christmas lights decorating houses along the way blurred past the windows, all those cheerful displays feeling like mockery after what we'd just experienced. When we got to our house, Sophie went straight to her room. I heard her crying through the door, but Jen said to give her space, that she needed time to process everything on her own terms. Jen went up about 20 minutes later and stayed with her for over an hour. I could hear quiet talking but couldn't make out the words. Carter came downstairs after changing out of his dress clothes. Sat next to me on the couch where I was staring at nothing, not even bothering to turn on the TV. "Dad, are Grandma and Grandpa bad people?" he asked. "How do you answer that to an 8-year-old? I settled on, they made a bad choice today. Sometimes people make bad choices. But they've been making that bad choice for a long time, haven't they?" To Sophie, Kid was more perceptive than I'd given him credit for. "Yeah, buddy, they have been. Then they are bad people," he said, with the kind of certainty only children possess. Good people don't keep making the same bad choice over and over when they know it hurts someone. Can't argue with 8-year-old logic when it's that solid. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept replaying everything in my head. Not just Christmas night, but years of accumulated moments. All the times I'd made excuses for my parents' behavior. All the times I'd told Sophie to be patient, that they'd come around eventually. All the times I'd chosen keeping the peace over standing up for my daughter, because that's what she was. My daughter. Not biologically, but in every way that actually mattered. And I'd failed her by letting this go on for so long. The next morning, I made a decision that I should have made years ago. For the past 8 years, I'd been sending my parents $1,200 every month. They'd been struggling since retirement. Dad's pension from the warehouse management job wasn't as generous as they'd expected, and they had debt from repeatedly bailing out my brother Kyle's various failed business ventures. Every few months, Kyle would show up with some new startup idea that needed just a little seed money to get off the ground, and my parents would hand over thousands of dollars they didn't have. I'd been helping them stay afloat, covering their mortgage payment, utility bills, car insurance, and various other expenses they claimed they couldn't afford. Started doing it right after Carter was born, when my income had finally reached a point where I could comfortably help them out. Figured it was the right thing to do, taking care of parents who'd taken care of me. $1,200 a month for 8 years straight. Never missed a payment. That's $115,200 total that I'd sent them. Money that could have gone towards Sophie's college fund. Money that could have paid for family vacations, or Jen's student loans from nursing school, or a bigger house. Instead, it went to people who couldn't show basic human decency to to a 14-year-old girl who'd never done anything wrong except not share their DNA. I called the bank and canceled the automatic transfer. Then I blocked my parents' numbers. By that evening, my brother Kyle was calling. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message about how I was destroying the family over hurt feelings and needed to man up and apologize to Mom. Apologize. They wanted me to apologize. 3 days after Christmas, my dad showed up at my house. I was in the garage working on my truck when he pulled up. He got out of his car looking tired and older than I remembered. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" I asked, not putting down my wrench. "About what happened. Your mother. She didn't mean it the way it sounded." "Really?" "Because it sounded like she told my daughter she wasn't family." "Pretty straightforward." "Sophie's not your daughter," Dad said. "Not legally." That's when something snapped in me. "I've changed her diapers," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I've stayed up with her when she was sick. I've helped her with homework. I've taught her to ride a bike. I've been to every parent-teacher conference. I walked her to her first day of kindergarten, and I'll walk her down the aisle at her wedding someday. So you can take your not legally and get off my property." "Blake, be reasonable." "Reasonable?" I laughed. "I've been reasonable for 10 years. Watching you treat her like an inconvenience. Watching Mom give her clearance gifts while Carter got expensive presents. Making excuses for your behavior because I thought family was supposed to stick together. But you're right about one thing. She's not your family. Because family doesn't treat kids like that." Dad's face went red. "We took you in when you were a kid. We raised you. This is how you repay us? By cutting us off? You raised me. Past tense. Your job was done when I turned 18. Everything I've sent you since then was a gift. And gifts can be taken away when the recipient proves they don't deserve them. The money is going somewhere better now. Sophie's college fund, Carter's savings account, maybe a family vacation where everyone is actually treated like family." Dad left without another word. A week later, my phone exploded with messages. Extended family, cousins I barely talked to, my mom's church friends, all of them weighing in on the situation. My mom had gone on social media painting herself as the victim, posted about her ungrateful son who abandoned his elderly parents, and how modern young people have no respect for family values. The post got shared in her church group and local community pages. Comments rolled in from people who didn't know the full story. Poor woman. Kids these days are so selfish. Blood family should always come first. Praying for her to be reunited with her son. My brother Kyle shared the post with his own commentary about how I'd completely changed since marrying Jen, and how she was isolating me from my blood family. The irony of Kyle talking about family values while living off our parents' money at age 33 wasn't lost on me. Jen read those comments, her eyes turning red. Then she turned to me and asked, "Do you want to respond?" I thought about it. Could write a lengthy post explaining everything, list every time they discriminated against Sophie, detail the $115,200 I'd sent them over 8 years, expose every double standard. But I didn't need to do all that. I just posted one photo. The blue knitted scarf with uneven stitching lying on our coffee table. Simple caption. My 14-year-old daughter taught herself to knit for 2 months to make a gift for the person she called Grandma. That woman refused it and said, "Your wife's kid doesn't have the right to call us Grandma." I have nothing more to explain. No attacks, no mention of money, just the truth and the scarf. Within a few hours, the comments under my post began to change. "She said that to a 14-year-old? The girl's been in the family all these years and still isn't considered a grandchild? The scarf is beautiful. Poor kid. I can't imagine anyone saying that to a child." Then the comments under Mom's post began to shift as well. People started asking questions, started doubting, started seeing the other side of the story. Some of her church friends even commented asking if she'd really said those words to a child. Mom took down her post within 24 hours. But screenshots live forever, and the damage was done. 2 weeks after Christmas night, when I got home from work, Jen handed me a package. No sender name on the outside, just an address from a law office in the wealthiest area of Columbus. I opened it. Inside was a thick envelope and a handwritten letter. The moment I saw the familiar handwriting, my heart skipped a beat. It was from Aunt Margaret. Margaret Mitchell is my dad's older sister. She's 72, widowed for 8 years. Her husband used to own a large car dealership in Columbus and left her considerable wealth when he passed. She has no children and lives alone in a mansion across town. I'd only met her a few times in my life, mainly at family funerals or weddings. But what I remembered most about Margaret was how my parents talked about her. They hated her. Hated that she was wealthy but never lent them money. Hated that she lived independently and didn't need anyone. hated that she was the only person in the family who dared say things to their faces that no one else would say. To me, Margaret was the relative I'd always wished I had more of. Every time I met her, though rare, she always asked about me with genuine concern. She was the only family member who sent a congratulations card when Sophie entered 6th grade, even though she'd only known about Sophie for a few years. I opened the letter, my hands trembling slightly. The first line read, "Blake, I've read everything online. I didn't call because I wanted you to receive this first." I flipped to the thicker envelope and opened it. Inside was a stack of notarized legal documents. A trust fund for Sophie Mitchell Webb and Carter Webb. I continued reading the letter line by line. "I met with my lawyer last week. The portion of my estate I had planned to leave to Richard and Kyle will now be placed into a trust fund for your children. Both of them. Sophie and Carter. This is my gift to Sophie, my granddaughter. Tell her that she is blood family no matter what anyone says. Look at my life and tell her about it. I don't have children, not because I didn't want them, but because life didn't give me that opportunity. But I understand one thing. Family isn't defined by blood. Family is defined by love and choice. You chose Sophie, and I choose both your children. As for Richard and Linda, I'll just say this. Pride won't feed them in their old age, but that's their choice, not yours." The last line of the letter made my eyes blur. "Tell Sophie I'd love to receive that scarf, if she still wants to give it to someone. I promise to wear it every winter." I sat in the living room looking at the letter and legal documents in my hands. Jen came over and sat beside me, not saying anything, just putting her hand on my shoulder. And for the first time since Christmas night, I cried. Not from sadness, but from realizing that amid all this chaos, there was still someone who saw Sophie the way I saw her. Still someone who understood that love doesn't need a birth certificate to prove itself. That evening, when Carter was asleep, I called Sophie down to the living room and told her everything. About Aunt Margaret, about the trust fund, about having someone in this family who truly considered her a real granddaughter. Sophie sat quietly, listening, her eyes gradually turning red. When I finished, she hugged me tight, tighter than she'd ever hugged before. Then she whispered words that made me tear up. "Thank you." Not, "Thank you, Uncle Blake," like that first day we met. Not, "Thank you, Uncle," like the years after. Just, "Thank you." Jen came out from the hallway carrying Carter. Turns out the little guy wasn't sleeping but had snuck down to listen. The four of us hugged in the living room. Nobody saying anything more. Just the sound of the clock ticking and the warmth of people who truly belong together. As for my parents and brother, I heard the months after were very difficult for them. The money I'd been sending monthly suddenly disappeared, and debt started piling up. They'd been living beyond their means for years, assuming I'd always be there to bail them out. Without my $1,200 monthly contribution, they couldn't make their mortgage payments. The credit cards they'd been paying minimum balances on started going into collections. The car they'd been leasing got repossessed. Eventually, they had to sell the house in Westerville just to make ends meet. They moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, the kind of place they would have turned their noses up at a year earlier. Kyle disappeared after hearing about Aunt Margaret's will. Probably went off to find new funding sources for startup dreams that would never come true. Last I heard, he was trying to launch some cryptocurrency thing and living in someone's basement. And that was the price they paid for refusing to love a child for all those years. The $1,200 a month I used to send them? I now use it for better things. Opened a savings account to buy Sophie her first car when she goes to college. Take Jen to the spa once a month because she deserves to rest. Let Carter join the football team he'd been dreaming about. Small things that bring absolute joy to the people I love. A year has passed since that Christmas night. We're living more peacefully than ever. We travel more. We write to Aunt Margaret more often. Last week, she sent us a photo from her trip to Switzerland. In it, she's smiling, wearing the blue knitted scarf with uneven stitches around her neck. Sophie looked at that photo for a long time, then smiled. The first genuine smile since last Christmas night. And I knew the wound in her heart was slowly healing. My parents tried reaching out a few times after they sold the house. Sent messages through relatives. Even showed up at my workplace once. They wanted to reconcile, which really meant they wanted the money back. I told them the same thing every time. You made your choice on Christmas night. Live with it. Kyle sent me a message last month saying I was destroying the family and that Mom was devastated. I replied with a screenshot of Mom's text from Christmas night calling Sophie your wife's kid and blocked him. Some extended family still think I went too far, that I should forgive them because they're still your parents and family is family. These are usually people who weren't there that night, Who didn't see a 14-year-old girl's face when she was told she wasn't really family? Who didn't watch my 8-year-old son stand up for his sister when the adults wouldn't? I don't owe those people an explanation. And I certainly don't owe my parents forgiveness. They had 10 years to treat Sophie like family. 10 Christmases to get it right. 10 years of watching her try so hard to be accepted. And every single time, they chose to show her she wasn't good enough. Well, now they get to experience what it feels like to be excluded, to be on the outside looking in, to watch other people be happy without them. Sophie's doing great now. She's 15, thriving in school, and has a group of real friends who appreciate her. She still talks to Aunt Margaret regularly. They video chat every Sunday afternoon. Margaret's been teaching her about investing and has promised to help with college applications when the time comes. Carter's still the same protective little brother. He tells everyone at school about his awesome sister and gets genuinely confused when people ask if she's his real sister. Of course she's real, he says. She's standing right there. Kid's got his priorities straight. Jen and I are stronger than ever. Cutting off my parents removed a constant source of stress from our marriage. We don't argue about whether to attend family events anymore. Don't stress about what gifts to bring or how to explain my parents' behavior to the kids. We're just living our lives with people who actually want to be part of them. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.